This is a video on how I flush my water heater. Some people say that you shouldn't flush your tanks because it doesn't make a difference. When I moved to this house, the sediment was all the way up to about this level high. So look at how much sediment you're gonna have inside that tank. That's less water that is in your tank now because all this is basically full of sediment. And also, this is an electric water heater. There are heating elements in the electric water heater. So there's actually one here and one up there. So what's going to happen is if this sediment goes up here, it's covering the bottom heater. So that means that your water heater is not being, the water is not being heated in this area down here. You're basically, this is out of commission for you. So now the only one working is the top one. So I had to actually remove everything from the tank, use a vacuum, and I put it right through the hole of the element here, and I vacuum a lot of that stuff out. I try to flush it out. It took me almost a day to do that. I filled up one of those buckets full of sediment from inside that tank, and all that sediment was in there. The sediment can eat up through that metal. I understand that the material in there has a coating that is supposed to prevent it from doing that, but clearly it doesn't. That's why you have tanks that leak, because the rust ends up developing in there, and it's because of all the material that stays sitting in there for years and years and years. I suggest you flush all that sediment out of there, because if you don't, you're going to be replacing the whole water heater, and at the same time it's going to save you from having to buy new element and having to buy anno rod. So we're gonna flush this tank. I'm gonna show you the steps that I take to do that, and hopefully this video will help you. First, we gotta turn off the heat source. So we gotta determine what is heating up your tank. In my case, this is an electric water heater, so all I have to do is shut off the circuit breaker for the water heater. If you have a gas operated tank, then all you have to do is change your temperature settings to either pilot or vacation mode. But that's only if you have a gas operated water heater. The reason why we turn off the heat source is because we don't want the burner to be on when there's no water inside the tank. That can basically heat up the tank so much that it might melt the metal inside the tank. So make sure that if you have a gas operated water heater, you turn the temperature settings to either pilot or vacation mode. Next, you shut off the circuit breaker. My circuit breaker is this one. I already shut it off. I pushed it this way, so now it's shut off. I know the electricity is not going to my water heater. Next, you need to shut off your cold water supply. It comes from this pipe here, this copper pipe. If you follow it straight up, you're gonna see a shut off valve here. Just turn it. That shuts off the cold water that comes into the water heater. There's a second copper pipe. I actually insulated it, but in here there's another copper pipe. This is the outlet. This is basically where the hot water goes into the house. But in the meantime, this is a cold water supply. How do you know that? Well, you can grab it and you can feel, and you'll notice that this is cold. The other one will be hot. Next, we're going to connect the garden hose, and make sure you don't cross thread it. So if you feel like it's cross threading, just make sure that you adjust it. This garden hose is actually leading to the outside of the house. I made sure that it was a safe place where the water was going, because it's gonna be hot water. Because it's so hot, kids can get burned, pets can get burned, anybody it touches it can get burned. So even plants can get damaged with the hot water. So make sure that wherever you're displacing this water is a safe place. So now you just make sure this is snug. So make sure it's snugged, it doesn't turn any further. That should be tight enough. I put this plastic cover down here to catch any drips, because I know for a fact that my hose doesn't have a good seal here. So I want to make sure that I catch any drips that come out of that. We got to open up a faucet in the house where the hot water faucet. When the water starts draining from here, it's going to cause a suction on the top of the tank here. It's going to want something to compensate for the water that is coming out, otherwise the water will not drain out. So what you want to do is, if you open up a hot water faucet, you're going to be introducing air into the system. So air is going to come from the pipe. This is the outlet pipe that goes into the house. Air is going to come down this way, and it's going to fill that area here with air as the water drains out. So that's what we're doing next. We got to open up a hot water faucet. And here we are. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to open up this faucet. So now it's time to open up this spigot. So I use a flathead screwdriver. That's what mine uses. I just turn it. As you can tell, some water is coming out. There we go. It's all the way open. So here's the water coming out of the tank. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of like looking to see if there's any sediments on it. So the water is going to be draining for probably 20 minutes. That's how much I'm going to give it. And then I'm going to go and check the hose again to see if there's any water coming out. If the water keeps coming out, I just give it more time until all the water is out of the tank. If water is now draining out of your tank, if you don't see any water coming out of your hose, it might be two different issues. One might be that the spigot is clogged with a lot of sediment here. It's not allowing any water to come through, which is what happened to me when I did it, I think like 4 years ago when I moved into this house. The other possibility is that you might have a backflow preventive valve installed somewhere in the system. So what you should do in that case, if you want to allow air into the system, is that you can use a pressure release valve. So this pressure release valve, we got to do is pull this up, like kind of like lift it up this way and strain it up in this direction, and that will allow air to come into this pipe and into the system, so that way the water can flow out of the tank. I wouldn't like to use this at all. The reason is because this is very sensitive, and it's possible that you might damage this, or the other thing is, you always have to remember you don't want to keep this open later on when you fill up the tank. So but if you have no other choice and you have some type of backflow preventive valve in the system, yeah, they're gonna have to use this. So just be careful, be very gentle with it, and make sure this is straight out this way when you open it. Also, this pressure release valve is here in case a lot of pressure builds up inside the tank to the point which it could actually explode because of the amount of pressure inside the tank. So what this does is, at a certain amount of pressure, this valve opens and allows the pressure to get released through this pipe all the way down here, and it comes out through there. And like, when I mean pressure, I mean like either hot steam, if there's a lot of steam build up in there, it's very hot, things like that. Even hot water can come out through there too. If you leave this open and the water fills up to this level, it might let water out if this valve is open. So you gotta be very careful with this. But this is specifically to prevent your tank from basically exploding from pressure. It's still not completely drained, but I'm going to show you the type of sediment that's coming out of the hose. So you see all that white stuff, the flakes, they look like little pieces of rocks. All this, that's the sediment that's coming out of the water heater. Alright, so the water drained out completely. How I know is that I looked at the hose, the water stopped coming out. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna try to agitate the mineral deposits on the bottom of the water heater. So to do that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the shut off valve for the cold water that comes in the water heater. I'm gonna open it. And then I'm gonna stop. Just give it like probably 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Let the water fall down to the bottom. And do that one more time. So you can count up to what, 15, 20, 25 seconds. I'm going to try to remove this and see if this is clotted. It's possible that this gets full of sediment here and doesn't allow the water to flow out. So next I'm going to shut this off. So I'm going to close the spigot. There you go, shut off. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at this now and see if there's any water, if the water is coming out of the spigot now. So I'm going to unscrew this. Okay, so far so good. Next I'm going to try to open this and see if there's any water coming out. I'm going to do this slowly just in case. I'm catching all this water in the pan here. See, water's still coming out. I'm going to shut it off. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to reconnect the hose. And we're going to open back the spigot. So I open back the spigot. So I want to let all that water drain out because I noticed there's still water in there. I'm going to shut it off again now. And I'm going to see if I can check to see if any more water is coming out. So we're going to open the spigot again. This time you see water still coming out. I'm going to see if there's any sediments here while I have it open. Sometimes sediments get stuck in here. I'm having a hard time putting this wire in there. I try to turn it just a little bit, a little bit of a turn, like a little bit of an angle, to see if maybe the angle can help it get in there. So I'm going to try to open this up, and once I open it up, put a wire in there and see if any more water comes out. I see a lot of sediment coming out with the water. I really want to see, there you go. Let's see if any more sediment comes out. There's a lot of sediment coming out right now, but it's still spilling water out. I'm just curious about how much sediment is in here, since all this is coming out still. Now I'm going to try to shut it off because I'm getting too much water in here. If you can tell, all this is sediment. There's a lot of sediment still in there. So that means that I probably need to flush it again. So what I'm going to do next is, I'm going to put this back on. So let's open this back up again. And now I'm going to open up the shut-off valve again. So open this back up. I'm going to let water get into the tank again. Shut it off again. And now wait until it drains out again. Okay, so I flushed it a few more times. After a certain amount of time, I got a little bit of the flakes, but I'm satisfied with the amount that is coming out. I make sure that there was no more inside the tank by pushing that wire in. Notice that not much sediment came out, which means that the tank has been flushed. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to shut off the spigot. Then next we're going to remove the hose, the garden hose. Now we're going to open up the cold water. So we're going to open it up so that the tank can get full. So all I'm doing is I'm waiting until the water flows out, and then I shut it off. This is shooting out. Here's the timer. There we go. Water is flowing. I can shut it off. As you can tell, some of the water is dark. The reason why the water is dark is because when you shut off the water, sediment tends to accumulate on the bottom of that pipe. And it's just sitting there. So when the pressure builds up again in the pipe, when you open it back up, then it pushes all that sediment at the same time out of the pipe, and that's why you get that brown water coming out. So you just let that water drain out until it clears up, and then you should be fine. Now, we know for sure that the hot water tank is completely full, because the water ended up reaching the faucet on the second level. So because of that, now we can actually turn on the breaker, or you can program your thermostat to whatever settings you feel comfortable with. But this is the only point at which you start it. You don't want to start that before you open up all the water and the tank is completely full, because remember, for electric, the heating elements needs to be submerged under water. You don't want them getting hot while there's no water making contact with it. So keep that in mind, because you can burn it out. So now we're gonna turn on the circuit breaker so that we can supply energy to the water heater so that it can start heating up the water now that the water heater is full. So we go back to the panel. Water heater is now working, and you can hear the water heater heating up the water now. The elements are heating it up, and normally it starts up here. This element up here starts heating it up, and then once that's done, this one then kicks in afterwards. But for the most part, this is the type of sediment that I see on mine. When you touch it, it feels like sand, but it's white. It looks like snowflakes. There it is. It's almost like sand, like white sand. I hope this was instructive. I hope you learned something from this, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up, and it doesn't cost anything to subscribe if you want to see more of this type of work, fixing things around the house. Well, take care.